Karen says I traumatized her kids by selling them a Ninja Turtles comic in my shop. So this happened a few weeks ago. I stopped at a local comic book shop to pick up a hardbacked copy of The Last Ronin. For those that aren't familiar with the book, it's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles story where 3 of the brothers have been killed, and the surviving brother is on a mission to avenge their deaths. As I'm taking the book to the counter to buy it, these 2 kids, a boy and a girl who looked to be between 5 and 7 years old, see the book and ask their parents for a copy. So, as I'm speaking to the cashier, their father approaches me. "Excuse me, my kids were interested in that book. Are there any more copies?" I say, "Yeah, there's one more, but this specific one is pretty violent for kids their age. You'd probably be better off buying them another title." I point to another Turtles book. The mother joined the conversation. "It's Ninja Turtles. I'm pretty sure my kids can handle characters from a Nickelodeon show." But this one is more in the tradition of the original comics from the 80s. "It's fine, just show me where the book is." "Okay, it's right on that first shelf, but I warned you." So I continue talking with the cashier as the family sit down to look through the book. All of a sudden, we start hearing crying from both kids as they're seeing their favorite heroes on the half shell meet their doom. The father tries to console the kids while the mother angrily approaches the counter. "What is this? Ninja Turtles are supposed to be for kids. But after seeing this book, they'll never be able to look at the turtles the same. This book just ruined my kids' favorite cartoon for them." The cashier said, "Ma'am, we tried to warn you that these weren't the Nickelodeon turtles your kids like, and I even suggested a more family-friendly title for you, but you insisted that one. You shouldn't be selling this book in the first place." And with that, she demands that the cashier let them have 2 different books free of charge to apologize for the emotional stress the kids now had to deal with. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you were warned about the book. I can't just give you something for free because your kids are crying. Besides, you didn't even purchase that copy." Hearing that, the mother tried blocking people from buying anything, but she quickly stopped at the threat of the cashier calling the police. She muttered something about getting people together to boycott the store until it shut down, and then she stormed out. As of today, the store is doing just fine. I guess the boycott didn't go quite as planned for her. Should we have tried harder to stop her? Are we the jerks? Nope, that's on them, and trying to get free stuff based on something you didn't buy is an epic Karen move. You know what gradually dawned on the narrator reading this? The completely plausible fact that similar conversations have taken place thousands of times just because a lot of people don't understand that not all comic books are for children. And that's been a thing for decades because as far as I know, Tales of the Crypt and similar books have been going since the early 1940s. So, parents of many different generations have accidentally traumatized their kids with graphic novels for 80 years on the basis that comic books are for kids. You'd think we'd have learned by now. Then again, after working on this channel for so long, the human incapacity to learn shouldn't be surprising to me. You hear that, people? You've jaded me. It's fine. I'm too jaded to care. Forget everything about this place? If you say so, boss, it's your funeral. Many years ago, I worked for a little company. The CEO was a miser of the first order. We needed image hosting for a large client account, and the CEO was unwilling to pay for maybe $2 to $3 grand in annual image hosting fees at the time, even though the company made millions off the deal. Me, being an enterprising individual, figured out a way to host the images on Flickr. I saved the login information in a physical notebook and kept informing them that this is a house of cards and that we really need to switch to a professional service. Several months later, I was promoted and asked for a raise to go with my promotion. The CEO said no, all promotions and raises required CEO sign-off. I tried negotiating, but CEO said no and to leave if I didn't like it. So I left. CEO told me to forget everything related to the job here, and he'd sue me if I did anything with the client accounts afterwards, like sabotage or steal clients. I told him I'm leaving all of my knowledge behind in the notebook in my final email to him, my manager, and I BCCE'd my personal email. In this email, a full inventory of what I left behind, invoices, contracts, among other things, including this entry: personal notebook, account notes and reference material, including image hosting logins for the accounts, keep for reference in bold letters. Recently, 10 years after I left that job, I received a professional networking site message from the CEO, telling me to help them with my old accounts or he'll sue me. Apparently, Flickr changed their terms of service and the images were deleted. In over 10 years, nobody updated any documentation or the image hosting. Nobody bothered checking the email account either, the one that was used to log into the Flickr account. I told him that I can't help. Per his request, I'd forgotten everything I knew about the company, and everything I knew was in that notebook that I'd left him over 10 years ago. Seriously though, I don't remember what I had for breakfast. Technical details from that long ago? I just laugh. In short, CEO of old company cheaped out on client solutions and employee compensation. Told me to forget everything when I left, and over 10 years later told me to help him with the same clients, but I'd forgotten everything since then. Yep, my money is on that lawsuit not ever happening. Anyone who threatens to sue that often is either a maniac or just blowing smoke up everyone's butt, including their own. I don't think there's any chance of a court finding against you. You weren't responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of that company's different assets and hadn't been for a decade. Also, way to run a business, idiot. Give employees no motivation to stick around, promote without benefits, make sure nobody in their right mind would want to take those higher positions, use free services with no fail-safes, not pay attention to them, and demand free help when they inevitably let you down. Step 5. Profit. Oh wait, no, the opposite of profit. I wonder how screwed this company was or if they miraculously recovered. I'm amazed they stayed in business for a decade, to be honest. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Sure, I'll take your pennies. I was working at a gas station about 20 years ago. One evening, this lady comes in, dumps like 5 or 6 handfuls of pennies on the counter, states her preferred brand. Ordinarily, our cashiers would just tell someone to F off if they were trying this, but I was pretty chill at the time and I had nothing to do but run the register and stuff my face with food from the deli case. So I reluctantly decide to help her out. I just said, okay, but I'm going to have to take other customers and I'll count this between them. She objects. It's all there. I counted it already. I reply, if my drawer comes up wrong, I'll get in trouble. I have to count it. Sorry. She starts stomping around the store, all mad, throwing her arms around, and I'd later come to recognize this as tweaker behavior. I start counting, meticulously setting the pennies aside in stacks of 10, and pausing every time a customer comes in. All the while, this lady was acting like she'd been stabbed through the hand. Maybe half a dozen customers, and 10 minutes later, I'm nearing the end of the pile. She's standing by the door getting more and more impatient, moaning at everyone who comes through. I was giving the other customers priority, so they didn't care, of course. Anyways, I finish counting and she's short maybe 15 cents? Who could remember? It was fairly common for people to raise the penny dish to cover the cost of a pack of cigarettes they couldn't quite afford, and this was generally allowed, because we lived in a small town and after all, who cares? But she promised me it was all there, and I got a bit of a bug up my butt about it, so I took the overflowing free penny dish and moved it behind the counter before calling her over. You're 15 cents short. Can't I just cover it from the dish? Where's the dish? What dish? There's a dish. There's always a dish. You took it away. I gave her a puzzled look, waved my hands over the counter. There's no dish. I don't see what you're talking about. She was incensed and cussed me out for a while, and I just shrugged it off. She left without her cigarettes, of course. My boss came over afterwards and told me I didn't have to count those or even take them. He didn't get me at all, but I just played it straight and was like, oh, okay. Am I the jerk? He did not understand that this was just entertainment for you at the end there. Or maybe I'm not sure. You did make a concerted effort to actually complete her transaction in the middle of your other duties, so I don't know that this was 100% malice from the beginning. In any case, by the end of this encounter, your purpose did turn to just messing with her, so we'll declare you a jerk vigilante. Nothing wrong with counting small change in quiet time, though. I wonder if this lady was picking up the pennies from the streets and couch cushions of her life, or whether she'd just been saving them for that long. The narrator just used to take all of his small change to the store automated checkouts and pour all of it in to see how much the amount came to. It's a great way to get rid of the stuff. When a new IT department head destroys a department's business just for a fancy email address. A number of years back, I was working for a company that had been around for many years. I was only relatively new myself, but there were still a couple of old guard senior engineers who had been there from the start. The kind that knows where all the obscure, undocumented insider stuff is and can fix most problems in 5 seconds that the rest of us might take hours to solve. One of the guys in particular, who I'll refer to as Joe, was a bearded and jovial gent with a very Steve Wozniak persona, and was always happy for us to approach him with our questions and welcomed us to leverage his vast knowledge of how the company's sprawling IT infrastructure worked to make our lives easier and cope with the constant, unrealistic expectations of upper management. He was a real old-school engineer, someone who loved their job and was well respected by everyone around the department. So when his friend, the current department head, a man of comparable knowledge and experience, retired and was replaced from the outside with a young and brash one with a business degree and very little technical knowledge who was also called Joe, it was a big change for everyone. Fortunately for us, he didn't interfere too much with the technical aspects of our day-to-day jobs. At least, at first. When the company first started out, they weren't too concerned with formality when it came to email address policy. In the later years, as the company had grown, they'd tightened the bolts with an official policy of issuing staff with a more formal address code of first name last name at department.countrycode.company.com. But those who were around from the early days retained their original name@company.com email addresses as an alias. It was somewhat of a status symbol and a sign of authority in the company to have one, and those that did would use that version as their sending address and proudly have it in their email signatures and on their business cards. The retired head had one such address, as did Joe, in the form of joe@company.com, and you always knew when you saw an email come into the inbox from someone with one of these addresses that they were someone important who had been around for a while. Most of the department heads were long-term employees who used them, and it wasn't long before the new IT head noticed this aspect of our corporate culture and clearly envied his peers. But as a new employee, he was stuck with his formal email address, and they weren't issuing new legacy email addresses of this kind unless they were for someone way up the food chain. Even as head of IT, he had no authority to claim one, which is why when one day he spotted an email from Joe using his legacy address, he saw an opportunity to get what he was coveting. So, as the tale goes, he called Joe into his office and had an exchange that went something like this. "Hey Joe, great work on the capacity report and getting it to me so quickly. We should be able to get approval from finance to expand our storage way sooner than I thought." Joe answered, "Not a problem. Is there anything else you needed from me for it?" "Nope, everything is here, thanks, but I happened to notice that when you sent it through, you were using a different email address, a little different from the rest of the team." "Oh, yes, that's one of the ones I've always used from when I started, and everyone here knows to reach me at. Also, some of our older systems and scripts we still use from the early days were hard-coded to use it as well, so I'm still actively using it to get critical alerts, and I've got rules set up to forward them onto the relevant team addresses we use these days. Since the only alternative is to budget a major project to go through all of our legacy stuff to change it, and we were never able to get approval for that with everything else going on around here." "I've got no problem with that, but I was interested in getting one of those kinds of addresses for me. It would make it easier for people to, know that I'm the head of this department rather than just another employee here. My predecessor had one, so it should be no problem for me to have one too, right? Can you make that happen?" "I'm sorry, I wish I could, but it's HR that makes that decision, and it's their policy to only issue personal addresses at the top of the corporate domain now for C-level recruits and their immediate assistants." "You've been here for a long time. Surely there's a way for you or someone you know who can make this happen." "I'm sorry, it's a decision way above my pay grade. I'd be happy to put a request in for you to the head of HR to see if they could do it as a favor, but I'm pretty certain what their answer will be." "Okay, well, do it and see what happens." Joe goes and logs the request, but of course the head of HR knocks it back, citing policy and not wanting to set a precedent even as a favor to Joe. Joe goes back to give the IT head the bad news. He knocks and says, "Hey, you know that request I put through to try and get you a top-level email address? Unfortunately, HR have knocked it back. I did my best to try and push it through, but they were very firm on our current corporate policy of not issuing any new ones except for those at the very top." New Joe was visibly unhappy. "I'm sorry to hear that. Are you sure you did everything you could?" Yes, it's out of either of our hands, unfortunately. Oh, fine then. And Joe was right. There was no way the IT head was going to be issued with a brand new personal address. However, his position did allow him to authorize the reassignment of existing email addresses to staff, which was normally used to forward mail and alerts still being sent internally to staff who'd left the company. He soon realized this was possible and formed a plan, calling Joe back into his office for another conversation. "Hey Joe, you know how we can't get a new personal email address created, but we can still reassign an existing one onto my name, right?" Joe frowned. We can do that, yes. You have the authority to have the email address of anyone who has left redirected or assigned to anyone else if you so wish. Did you want your predecessor's address? I mean, we can do it, but it would confuse a lot of people if they saw your email coming from someone who's gone. What about the email addresses of existing staff? Joe was frowning harder and seeing where this was going. You do have the authority, but it would still confuse people and you'd be getting all the legacy alerts and notifications, which would make you responsible for ensuring they flow through to the right people when they arrive. I think I can handle forwarding a couple of lousy emails whenever I see them. I have a greater need for visibility here and there's no business requirement for you to have one, so start the process of transferring joe@company.com across to me immediately. Let me know once it's done so I can let everyone know. So, poor Joe was forced to dig his own grave and give up the email address he had held since day one. He definitely wasn't happy about it, but he did as he was instructed. Falling back on his regular corporate address, he sent an email out to the immediate team and his contacts to let them know what was happening and to please use his full address moving forward to contact him. At the same time, the IT head proudly sent out a company-wide email broadcast letting everyone know that his email address had been updated and he could now be reached at joe@company.com as the head of IT. Weeks went by and it was clear that he was taking every opportunity to send out emails using his new address. New stationery was issued along with business cards, clearly showing his position and contact address. He was clearly reveling in having a coveted address and the prestige and recognition it instantly gave him, especially when dealing with other offices and people who didn't know he was only a relative newcomer. Life was good for new Joe, that is until one fateful morning when he wasn't in his office browsing Facebook like he'd usually be doing when everyone else arrived. Turns out he'd forgotten about his responsibility to forward through important notifications when they came through to him. He'd set up a rule to handle them, sure, but not to forward them as promised, but instead deleting them directly from his inbox without notice. One particular alert dealt with backup failures for a particularly important and long-term defense contract. One of our key SLAs was to ensure daily incremental and weekly full backups being performed on one of those old legacy systems that Joe had mentioned to him both verbally and in writing. The media in an old backup unit had failed and was repeatedly notifying the issue. It was normally a simple fix: replace the faulty media in the backup unit and restart a full backup run, but with no alerts being sent through anyone, there was a problem. So, when a request came through from the client to perform a restore of the previous week's data after an accidental deletion, that backup team found, to their horror, that no backups had been running for the past several weeks and the data had been lost. The client was not amused. The CEO, with whom they had a close relationship, was even less so. The IT head attempted to throw Joe under the bus when word came around that the company was going to incur a massive rebate for the SLA breach. But Joe, in his wisdom, had ensured that he had done a complete seer when handing over his email address, including email exchanges with the IT head highlighting the importance of the alerts, and to ensure that they went to the right people, including detailed instructions on how to set up forwarding rules and where to send them, all completely ignored by new Joe. HR policy was specific when it came to important email. It was the clear responsibility of the recipient to ensure they were handled accordingly, and the IT head had clearly failed in his accepted responsibilities. He didn't last probation and was gone within the next month. Everyone was wondering who would be getting in the position next. HR and management were tight-lipped on the topic, and there was plenty of speculation within the department about what might happen next. But everyone was smiling when they walked in on the Monday to see Joe sitting in the IT head office. In the wake of what happened, management decided in their wisdom that the IT department should have a head who actually knew something about IT, and tapped Joe to take the seat. He hung on for a few more years before retiring or moving on, but during his tenure he was one of the best IT managers I've ever worked for, and the position didn't change him from being the friendly, helpful, and supportive teacher that he was. I was sad to see him go, but while he was still with us, I always smiled when I saw his emails coming through to us from the old, friendly address of joe@company.com, which he had reclaimed and had been returned to its rightful owner. Sounds like the right man for the right job, and at first I was thinking that new Joe didn't seem like that much of a jerk, but boy did he start showing his true colors towards the end. Swanning around, showing off his fancy new status symbol that he's acquired, and then later showing us that he wants all of the perks and none of the responsibilities. Trying to chuck old Joe under the bus as soon as he realized that he'd crapped the bed is particularly telling. And thank frick that the veteran had created himself a paper trail so that when things inevitably went to crap, he was able to show exactly who and what had caused the problem. And that he'd warned about this issue from the start. As we've said many times, people, keep receipts, especially when you know things could go south like this. It'll help the proper people get blamed and save your job. Good job, Joe. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.